Hey, welcome back to another episode of Warrior Spirit, where we let the inner warrior shine in their light. Today, I have the honor and privilege of talking with a good friend and brother, Chad Nedland. This is the brother that you get to choose and not the one that was born to you. And sometimes those are better brothers. So Chad is an entrepreneur. He is a father, a husband, a beautiful soul. He calls himself the lazy lifter, and he tries to do the least amount as possible, which is why he's so successful. And we'll let him explain all that. Chad, thank you for joining me today, and pleasure to have you.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate you as well. It's an honor to actually be on this podcast for multiple reasons. One, I'm honored that you would see me worthy of this space and the people that you serve. And two, the warrior spirit, that's something that speaks very deeply to me. For many years, I was really lost as a child, and I didn't know myself. I didn't know my identity. I didn't know anything about who I was. I just knew who I was supposed to be in my family. And there were things that played out in my life. I always found out that I was first to raise my hand. I was the first to want to do things. I was the first to want to volunteer to be in a missions trip. I was the first one to offer to preach when I was on a missions trip. I would want to sing the solo. But I was terrified of people in the same process. They terrified me. But I felt always into this position of step forward, step forward, step forward. Well, this carried through all the way up until when I got out of high school, and I went into the military. And even in the military, in the first few years, I got 3 meritorious advancements, 2 letter of accommodations, presidential citation. It was like all of these things was always pushing me out to be in the front, but I still had no idea who I was. And I did a name search because somebody was talking about biblical names, and they said there's so much meaning in the name. And I went and I found my name, and all of a sudden everything like clicked in my head, and it went, Chad. This great leader, warrior. And I'm like, man, I've been fighting my whole life. I've been fighting and fighting and fighting. It's like I was always fighting in the trenches, and it was either what was going on around me or the internal battle within me, but I was always fighting. But in the same respect, I was always being promoted. I was always giving a lead position. I was always there, and I was like, oh my gosh, is this who I was created to be? And that spurred me in the military. I continued to excel. And I found out that there was a lot to who I was that I never explored. And there became a period of my life where I'm going to start diving into all the areas that are unknown to me. And it really spurred me in a lot of different directions and discovered a lot of things about myself.
So I know you as this bright light, giver's heart, just a total service mentality. And that's part of the leader, in you, but you do it from a place of wanting to make those around you better, not just make you look better. But I also know that you weren't always that way. You had a tumultuous period of your time. Can you take us back to starting there and what that looked like for you? Because
yeah,
grew up in an era where Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze really meant for you Purple Haze.
Purple Haze, right?
Yeah.
So I was in the military, and let's just say myself and my wife had different opinions of what a man and a wife meant in a marriage. I believed that a husband and a wife was one man and one woman for life. Apparently, we didn't all believe the same thing. And in one fell swoop, I lost my entire family. And not just my divorce. I lost my wife, but because I was in the service, because I wasn't, there for a court case. They didn't even bring in the courts that I was on the other side of the country, serving the country. I lost my kids. I lost my wife. I lost the foundation, the core of what I believed to be solid and true of the family unit. Lies were spread before I even got a chance to talk to my own family about it. My family relatively disowned me as a result of it. I went through a lot of pain in a really dark space, and I realized that everything that I believed in fell out from underneath me, and I realized there was no foundation of anything that I had discovered about myself, about people, about life, about my faith. Everything crumbled. And in fact, everything that I had built myself on, the foundation, my faith, my values, my morals, everything was shredded from me. And I looked at my commanding officer and I said, I love the military. I love my brothers and comrades, but you need to release me. I'm not going to re-up. You need to let me go, or I'm going to get somebody killed because my mind isn't here anymore. I mean, I'm not saying I lost my mind. It's like my mind just isn't here. I'm not attentive. And I left the military. When I got out, I was discharged. And I went back to Minneapolis, and there was only one person in my family that would even give me the time of the day, and that was my oldest brother. And probably gave me the time of day because he was the only one in the family that was also kind of black sheeped, but it was by his choices, by his lifestyle, by drug abuse, by drug use, and drug selling. He lived a life that was way outside of what our family believed was okay. And I went down to go spend some time with him. And I got wrapped up in the lifestyle. I got wrapped up in the scene. I started doing copious amounts of drugs. We were smoking half an ounce of weed every day as we were out delivering and doing sales. I started smoking methamphetamines. I started smoking crack, dropping acid, you name it. I was doing it. It was my life.
And how old were you?
At this point, I was early 20s.
Okay.
At that point. And there's a couple points where it's like, you know what, either I got to go shoot myself or I got to stop this. And then I'd go get stoned. And one night we were sitting around, my brother and I were high as a kite, just chilling in the living room and smoking a joint. And brother asked me, he goes, what you gonna do tomorrow? I was like, I don't know. So walk to California or something. He goes, all right, tell me when you get there. I was like, all right. And we smoked a few more joints and passed out. And in the morning I woke up and there was something different that day. I just kind of like hated me. It's just uncomfortable. I didn't want to be there. Everything around me it seemed just unfamiliar, which was odd because I'd been getting stoned in that room for months, right? And all of a sudden the words of my grandpa rang in my head. He says, if a man, you can take everything from a man, but you can't take his word. You know, if a man doesn't have his word, he's got nothing. And I thought to myself, I said, I've got nothing but my word. And then I remembered my words. I'm going to walk to California. And I didn't think twice. I looked at the dresser. I pulled $12.73 off the top of the dresser, stuck it in my pocket, grabbed a school bag that was on like this little school bag that was on the floor. It was red and black. And I put I think it was a couple pair of shorts, pair of pants, 2 shirts, some socks and underwear, and I walked out the door. And I began to walk and walk and walk. And somebody asked me years later when I shared my story, they said, how on earth do you just like walk to California? Now, it'd be different if I was in Arizona, but I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yeah. Well,
it was a little bit of a jump.
Yeah. I'm like, how do you just walk to California?
Right. And oftentimes they're looking for this profound answer of this drive, this thing that motivated you. And when it came down to, I just look at them and say, one step at a time.
Yeah.
Just one step. Sometimes it was just, I'd pick a spot on the road, maybe 20 feet ahead of me and be like, I got to get to there. Or I'd pick a tree. If there were no trees, I picked a rock because there had to be a destination. There had to be a purpose. Because without that, I would just want to sit down and quit because I had absolutely nothing left. I had nothing to hold on to in life. I had no love lost. You know, I literally, this was the only man that even accepted me after the rest of everybody in my life disowned me. And I realized that when I walked out, I missed nothing. There was no connection to anything in any way, including myself. So I had to pick points and be like, that's my purpose. And I want you all to listen to this for a second. What would your life look like if your only purpose was just to walk to that rock? And when you got there, your only purpose in life was to walk to that rock. And when you got there, it was walk to that rock. This went on for day after day, week after week, month after month. And I experienced a lot of things, and we don't have time to go through all the amazing stories and things that happened during that time. But let's just say when I hit California, I called up my brother. I mean, he asked me to. He said, call me when you get there. So the first time I called him. He's like, where the blankety blanket you been? You blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, I walked to California. He said, why didn't you call me? I said, you said call when I get there. He cussed me out some more, hung up, didn't talk to me for months.
Wow.
But again, I did exactly what I said I would do. I called him when I got to California. Because I remembered as I crossed the border into California, I remembered him saying, call me when you get there. And I was like, all right, I will. And I was like, that's the next thing that I said I would do. I got to California. The next thing I have to do is the next thing on the list. And it started to imprint on my mind that there's only one thing to do. Every day, there's only one thing, and that's the next thing. It's the most important thing. Nothing else matters. Just do the next thing. And we get to California, and I say me because by at this point, it was me and God. I thought I was alone. But it was me and God. And I'm in California, made it to Santa Monica. I was on the 3rd Street Promenade where they do all the street performing and everything. And I sat down on a park bench, and there's a newspaper there, and I hadn't seen a newspaper in like the longest time. And I never read the newspaper, but then again, I didn't have anything else to read. I didn't have any newspapers, no TV, no radio, no nothing. It was just me in silence for months, right? And so I pick up the newspaper, and I'm hungry. I'm hot. It's probably 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sun's beating down. It's one of those days where the sun's coming down, but the heat is radiating off the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt the heat like wafting up underneath the newspaper. And I moved the newspaper, and I look over on the ground, and I see this half-eaten Snickers bar. And I don't know if y'all have been hungry or if y'all have been really exhausted, but like if you get something that catches your attention when you're in that peak state, like you see every little detail, but you see nothing else. And I saw these little ants crawling all over this little thing, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm so hungry. And at that point, I wasn't thinking, I want to eat that. I was just thinking, I am so hungry. And I'm thinking like those ants, I'm so hungry. And then I thought, those ants don't need that whole thing. And I looked around, and nobody was looking at me. And y'all can judge me if you want, I don't care. I reached down, I picked up that thing, and I just went, I didn't even take time to like brush everything off. I was like, aunts, uncles, chocolate, nougat, I don't care what was in there. That was good, right? And as I'm chewing, I look over him, I lock eyes. Now I know where that smell was coming from. There was a man sitting across the promenade from me, sitting on the ground. Everything you can imagine in the old TV representation of the homeless bum on the street. Scraggly beard and dirty, nasty hair, just filthy. You know, you could smell him before you could see him. And he just stared at me. And I locked eyes with him, and he started to stand up. And I saw I was his target. I was where he was going. And I'm thinking, oh, crap. I just ate this man's last meal. Well, the part that I didn't mention yet was the fact that back in Colorado, there was an old man who blessed me beyond how I can express. And I still had $50 in my pocket. I didn't know anything about this new state. This was a whole foreign country to me. I grew up in the northern country, right? I didn't know anything about the city like that. So I wasn't going to spend that money, but man, that sure looked good when I was hungry. And I realized I just took this man's last meal, and I got $50 in my pocket. And he walks up to me, and I saw the kindest eyes. He looked at me, had kind of a little grin on his face, and he reaches for his pocket. And of course, being in the military, my instinct was immediate defense mode, like what's about to happen. I'm on high alert. Every nerve is peaked. Every hair on my body is spiked, and I'm like ready for whatever. I'm gonna have to beat this drunk on the street. And he digs his hand down deep and he pulls it out and he reaches out with his hands. And he takes my hand and he dumps change in my hand. He goes, you ain't got to eat off the ground, bro. He says, here, get you something to eat.
Wow.
And in that moment, he reignited everything in me that I thought had died. There's a lot happened on that trip out there. There was a lot of hurt people because of me on my way out there, because I didn't care about anybody and anything. I didn't go over and steal people. I wasn't breaking the law, but don't look at me cross-eyed. I'll knock your teeth out. I was angry and at times evil in nature. I tell people now, if I saw myself then, if I saw him now, I would cross the street, not to get away. I would cross the street to beat him so that he could hurt no one else. That's the type of man I had become. And that man dumped that little bit of change in my hand. And it reignited every good thing that I knew was in the human race. Every possibility, every potential, every ounce of love and compassion and hope and grace and mercy was reignited in those simple eyes. And I said, no, man, I can't just take this. He's like, no, I understand. No, just it's okay. And I'm like, hey, can I trade you something? I can't just take this from you. And he understood the street currency, right? Like, don't make a man feel like he's got nothing by not taking what he offers. I'm gonna allow you to feel like a man. I'll let you exchange what you have for what I've given. And I reached in my pocket and I felt the crinkle of those bills. I pulled them out of my pocket and I reached over and I put it in his hand and I opened my hand and he looked, he's like, no, you don't got to do that. That's too much. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I said, what you just gave me was far more valuable than anything I could possibly have given you. That's for you. That's my way of saying thank you. That's for you. Don't give it away. That's for you. I want you to do whatever it is that makes you feel good. Because you just woke something up inside of me I thought had died. And he looked at me and he smiled and he says, you hungry? I said, yeah. He goes, I haven't sat down and had a meal with another person in a long time. You want to go get something to eat? He goes, it's on me. I said, yeah, I did. And we headed up the street a little bit and there was a little place and we got a couple of burritos and we just talked and we just spent some time together. And I realized in that moment, I didn't realize what was going to happen, but I realized that my job was to bring hope to people in his situation who had lost hope. And over the next 7 years of living and sleeping in tramp camps and, I learned so much about myself. You want to learn something about yourself? Wake up in the morning and having somebody poop 2 inches from your head, or wake up to the gentle splattering of rain on your face, only to find out it's a drunk guy taking a whiz. You'll learn something about yourself in those situations. And the cool thing is when you step into life where people are, instead of standing where you are trying to reach out to them, but join them where they are, all the barriers come down. And I'm not talking you got to go sleep in a homeless camp. I'm saying just meet somebody in their low place. If they're having a bad day, just go be with them. Don't always try and pull them out. Don't always pull them up. Just go be with them. That will build the trust so that they'll open up and lean on you. Well, this transpired. A lot of things happened during that time, but one of the greatest things that I learned is that most people don't end up in the position that they're in life because they chose it. They ended up there because something happened. They're still there because they lost hope during the struggle.
Well, I know, I wasn't in quite your situation, but I was homeless, living on the streets, selling blood for gas money. And my only savior was that I'm not going to be one of those guys that stand on the corner and just hold a sign up. I'm going to figure it out and find a way. And I, through, communication skills and help, I had people who let me spend the night on their couch so that I could shower and go to work the next day. I had the little bit of extra for something to drink because of the selling my blood and the plasma
Mm-hmm.
and whatever. But you find the graciousness of people when you are gracious about it. I wasn't trying to be a victim and the circumstances that got me in there. I didn't wallow on that. I just tried to work my way out of it. And had it not been for a different variation of the people that you're speaking of, I don't think I'd have made it either, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
again, it humbles us enough to where we, as long as we never forget that, we know that it's our job to reach back and help those come along as well. And I think that that transformed a big spark in you, and you've helped reach out to many since then. You said you spent 7 years there. um, I know that you're remarried now.
Yes.
And I know that you guys also went on kind of a missions, uh, you talked about this on your platform. You talked your wife into quitting her job and traveling the world with Chad on a bicycle. So how'd you manage that?
Okay, well, I gotta clarify that. I didn't talk
Sure.
her into anything.
Yeah.
She shocked the daylights out of me. My wife is probably one of the strongest, most amazing women I have ever met. Not one of, she is one of the strongest, most amazing women I've ever met. Um, she's a whopping knee high to a toadstool, stiff breeze, and she blows away kind of gal. When I met her, it was long skirts down to the floor, 3 layers up, long hair, timid, quiet, peaceful.
Where'd you meet
I
her?
fell in at the department. It was in the produce department, wasn't it, sweetheart? Met her in the produce department, totally cliche.
Yeah, the typical way.
Right. And I met her there. We fell in love. At least I fell in love and she put up with me. But fell in love, and the moment that we said I do, I realized my traveling days, those are done. Living in and out of tramp camps and tent cities and homeless shelters, and working with people, that's those days are gone. And it's time to put on my big boy pants and be an adult. And I shared with her some of the things that I had done and my past. And we were talking one night, and I had shared with her, I had walked, east to west coast over 5 times, north to south 3. And we were talking one evening, and she says, remember when we were talking about you walking? And I said, yeah. And she goes, and I said, after doing all that walking, like, what are you going to do next? And I said, yeah. She goes, remember what you said? I'm like, no. She goes, he looked at me and says, well, I guess I'll have to bike it next. And I started to chuckle and laugh. And she goes, yeah, I think we're supposed to. I went, what? Because I think we're supposed to bike it. I was like, what? What just happened? And we went and we prayed, we came back, we talked about it, and then we went back and we prayed about it separately again. Then we came back and we talked about it. And about 6 months later, 6 to 9 months later, we put in our notices at work. We quit our jobs. We gave away everything that we owned. We got on some Walmart bikes with some trailers, with some tools and gears, everything that we thought we needed, but not for us, but for the work that we may be called to do. And we left with the intent that if anybody asked for help, the answer would just be yes. no matter what it was. And we just trusted. We said, you know what? This is what we believe God has called us to do. He is Jehovah Jireh. He's the provider. We're here to do the work. If they need help, we say yes. It's his job to provide the rest. And she had in her mind a mission that we were to accomplish, and that's to show people what it's like to trust God as the provider. And I had a message I wanted to share with people. It says, live what you profess to believe. Live in integrity. And we had shirts made up. If you couldn't speak, would the world still know what you believed? You know, living what you profess means to actually do what you say you believe in. And we put that to the test. And we left. And her dad, we sat down, had a conversation with her dad, and well, I did. And he was like, so he says, you came and you told me that you got a good job and you just got a raise as management and you were going to take good care of my daughter. I said, yes, sir. He goes, and now you're quitting your jobs, giving up everything that she's ever worked for, get on bicycles and go somewhere without a destination. I said, that's correct. He goes, and it was like there was a confidence in him, but a question on his face. And I looked at him, I says, I love your daughter, and she will never go hungry. She will never miss a meal. And he goes, all right. He says, give us a holler. Let us know where you're at.
And how old were you this time?
10, 34. Well, early 30s, 30, 34, 35.
Okay.
And
Nice.
hadn't ridden a bicycle since probably high school.
And you guys did what you said you're going to do.
And we did it. And we
God
did
provided.
it. Yeah, absolutely. Every step of the way. And we were out there for a good number of years. In fact, we left on bicycles. We never purchased it. By the time we were done, we came back in a full-size raised top conversion van with a camper. And now we live an immensely blessed life on a beautiful property, a nice home. We had a son during that time who passed away from SIDS at 10 months old. We continued to serve even in and around and through all of that. And now we have 3 beautiful children in the home again. So I've got 2 they're almost 30. And then I've got these 3 here, 5, 4, and 2 as of last week. So yeah, it's you can't outgive the blessing that you've got coming. And what I found through all of this is, like I said, there's certain lessons that I learned, all the way back to making the walk, where it's just one thing, one destination, one purpose, one focus every day, and nothing else matters until that's done. And then there's the understanding that people aren't there by choice. They're there because they got stuck. And I started implementing all of these different lessons and how things impact and connect, and how the energy and what we attract and what we push away. And I started to develop this into an greater understanding. And I've always been a very interesting communicator, not necessarily the best orator in the world, but I've always been a rather engaging communicator. And I got to learn how to do that better and better and better over the years. Especially, one person, they said, how do you become such a good communicator? And I said, oh, just live with the homeless for a couple of years. Because the only thing you've got is sharing stories. So you get good at telling your story. Because every time you turn around, there's somebody else asking you your story. It just becomes second nature. And I understood the power and the transformative effect of being able to tell your story in a way which gives hope and inspires. Then I moved into the business sector, and I realized, hey, the only reason people buy stuff is because of what they believe. And everything that they believe is based on the stories that they've either created in their own mind to justify what they've experienced, or the story that someone else gave them to build their belief. So if somebody's stuck somewhere because of what they believe, all I have to do is figure out how to institute a new story in their life So I figured out how to tell my story in a way that it becomes your story. And then my lessons become your lessons. And when my lessons become your lessons, your next step will most likely be the same one I took. And who better to guide you on the path that I took than me, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I found this was how I started to connect with people. And now I'm modestly successful in many things that I do. I provide for my family. I help people who need some help. But most of all, I have the opportunity to reach future generations. I desire to live a legacy that doesn't impact my children. I desire to leave a legacy that impacts the lives of every single person my children meet
Yeah.
after I'm dead.
And that's really cool. Like in a few weeks from the taping of this, because this is going to air a little bit later, but in a few weeks from this taping, it will be the 4-year anniversary of my father passing. And the greatest gift that I know that I've given him, he was a man of very few words, and he wasn't as outspoken as you are, but the lessons that he taught his children and the love that he gave to those around him live on through us, and his legacy lives through a lot of the stuff that I taught my own children, a lot of the stuff that I teach my clients or work with my clients with. A lot of the philosophies came from my dad. And so, his legacy lives on since his passing. And I know the impact that you have on those around you. So, your legacy is definitely one that will live on for sure. So, what's the next step that Chad Nedland takes, because you've served massively, for 20 plus years. You have reconnected and rebuilt a life and a family, and that aspect of it. You're a successful entrepreneur by almost anybody's standards, and yet you're still young out there kicking it and doing it. So what's next for Chad?
This year, this year is the impact community, the impact makers community. And I've been pushing my whole life, and I always know that there's something greater. And Ed Milet just put out a short little video about a month ago, and it just resonated with me because the way that he put it is so true. He said, if there's something that you've ever desired, if you ever have a feeling that where you're at is not enough, it's not a matter of lack, it's that you were called into something greater. And if you were called into something greater, it's already available, it's waiting for you. Don't sit back, don't wait, don't be complacent, don't stop, but pursue it with everything that you are. And now that's a mashup of what he said, but that really resonated with me because for years I've gone from, helping people one-on-one in a ditch 7 miles outside of the town, eating roadkill because that's all we had, to speaking on stages in front of hundreds and thousands of people, to singing, to performing, to having my book being sold around the world. And just like all of a sudden, the moment you come online, you're international. You're a global asset if you have something of value. Now it's just a matter of being found. And I went, wow, I went from one-on-one to, a group of people, to moving up to higher level people that were operating at a different level in business, to one-on-one, and then into group coaching, and then into masterminds, and then, and now it's like talking to masses. And I thought, why do I constantly feel greater, more? And this year, at the beginning of the year, during prayer time, I heard God say, I've called you for something greater than where you are. I've called you to make a greater impact than what you're doing. And I'm thinking, well, what more do you want? I mean, you can always spend more money on ads, right? Like, yeah. You can always dump more money into ads and get more reach. But I knew that's not what he meant. He didn't say, I created you for a bigger audience. He said, I created you to make a greater impact. And I was trying to figure like, what does that mean? And right when I asked that question, he says, to make a greater impact than you can do on your own, you have to do it in community. Gather the impact makers and show them how to accomplish more in community than they ever could in isolation. And I was like, that makes total sense with everything that I teach in business already. Leverage, 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 right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if I actually want to make a greater impact and I have something that I want to affect the entire world, then I just have to reach out to the world leaders and get them all to get on board. Okay, so in the same aspect, the world leaders are not presidents and czars and queens and kings. World leaders are the ones who are actually guiding others. They're the impact makers because we imprint a part of who we are onto the next person. And that then becomes something that is imprinted on everybody that they come in contact with. So wouldn't it make sense if I have a message, if I want to impact greater, then I have to impact the people at the top of the food chain and allow it to filter into the rest of the world. So we created the impact maker community, and we're reaching out, we're identifying people who are trying to make the world a more positive place, a better place, whether it be through their message or through their businesses. You know, maybe it's somebody that owns a software that frees marketers up, you know, an extra 3 hours a day because of the automated tasks it does. This could change the world if you deliver that to fathers who are entrepreneurs, because now they have more time to build that relationship with their children and raise them up in a way that is honorable and strong and forthright. They're world changers just by creating a piece of software, as long as the software serves a purpose to create a better world. And in the same way, you're an impact maker. I watch you change lives every time you interact with people, because just who you are. You have a message of hope, of encouragement. You're an impact maker. So what we do is we put those two people in the room, and maybe he goes, Daryl, wow, you are doing a lot of stuff over and over again that you don't need to. Did you know my software fixes that? And you turn around and you go, yeah, but did you understand how much more effective your message would be if you stopped focusing on the profit and started talking about the benefit to the fathers? All of a sudden, in community, you both got super, super powerful because you were able to leverage the resource, the knowledge, the insight, and the wisdom of one another. That's where we get to make a greater impact together, more powerfully than we could in isolation. So what we're doing is we're gathering those people together. We're creating networking events in which they can just connect on a real level. We're small at the start. Why? Because I do what I always do in business. I'm doing my best to keep as many people out as possible. I only want the right people inside.
Yeah, not everyone's for us.
Yeah. We want to keep the right people in there. I don't want a big list. I want the right list. I don't want a big crowd. I want the right crowd. And when you focus that way in your business, in your life, then you get to leverage. Your life is the sum of the top 5 people in your life. You get to choose them. That's the part people forget. You get to choose the people that you surround yourself with. You get to choose the the level that you operate at. If you want to operate here in business, then you have to sit here with people in business. Even though you're currently operating here, you have to reside here, and all of a sudden the level in the bar rises.
It's the same with our it's the same with people who aren't in business. You know, a lot of my audience, you know, they're givers and healers, and they don't have a business, but they still have to serve from their heart and in that capacity. So it's the same. If they're surrounding, you know, I can't see them. If they're surrounding their level over here, you know, then they're gonna rise. But if they keep hanging around the level down here, it doesn't serve the people they want to serve, and it doesn't serve themselves. So they're always having to, you know, if you're, and you correct this a lot, people say, oh, if you're the smartest person in the room, you know, you change rooms, but somebody's always smartest in something in that room. And it's the leverage of knowledge that's in there. You know, you may be excellent at this, that makes you smartest in that. I may be great at that, makes me smartest at that. So it's not that we're the smartest in the room, it's that we're dialed into our niche on what we're good at, and then that we can parlay to others, which then leaves that imprint you're talking about.
Yep. So kind of a caveat on that, this is going to tie together really well, is I always tell people, one of the big thing I say is I used to strive to be the smartest person in the room when I didn't understand my value. Now that I understand my brilliance and my genius in certain areas, I strive to be the bottom rung in every room. That doesn't mean lower myself. It means I've added a rung to the bottom of the ladder of the next level. See, although I go into the next level, now I have all of these people that can teach me, that can draw me higher, that can raise my vibration, that can raise my knowledge, my experience, my wisdom, my resources, by modeling them. But here's the cool thing. You don't get on someone else's bottom rung. You become a bottom rung on their ladder. And what happens when you add a bottom rung to a ladder?
Others can climb.
No. You raise the entire ladder up. Because you now added something that was never there before.
I like it.
Yes, others can step on you on their way up, but they'd be wiser to become the bottom rung and learn from me as I learned from them and from them and from them. So what most of the time we fear getting to in that room, that next level, because all of a sudden we're the dumb one in the tree. Don't forget, getting into that next level brings your genius into the room, which raises the floor. Too many people talk about having a glass ceiling in business. I think your main problem, stop trying to raise the glass ceiling and just raise the floor, because everybody's going to fall. But if you bring the floor up right behind you, raise the bar behind you, you don't have that far to fall, which means you don't have that far to climb to get back where you were.
That's fantastic.
So I look at it and say, be the bottom rung. Don't get on it. Be the bottom rung. It raises the bar of the entire room, and it positions you in the greatest position to receive and support others. And when you're in a position of support, servanthood, you're in the greatest position of power in the room.
That's awesome. And as we wrap this up, I'm going to ask you two questions that I ask each guest. And I know you've listened to some of the other podcasts, so I know that you know the questions. But what is your best advice for those listening who are thinking about their walk to California and how it's going to transform their life?
They say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, but it doesn't. It begins with the decision to do what you said you're going to do. It's not the decision to do all of the steps to get there. It's the decision to arrive at your destination. Once you've made the decision where you're going to arrive, then you can chart your path. And once you chart your path, your only focus is the next step. You can never feel overwhelmed if the only thing that you have to accomplish is one task today. You'll never experience overwhelm. It's just one thing.
I love that.
As soon as it's done, you look and you'll follow the process I used, and then what's the one thing? And then you just got one thing. And if you start with the most important thing, the one thing that if nothing else got done, you did that thing that would move you towards your goal. If you only did one thing that day, you could go to bed and you could rest well because the most important thing got done. But most people do all of the inconsequential, easy things and then go to bed stressed out because the one thing that should have gotten done, you never started.
Yep. I totally agree with that, and I love that. And then the last question I ask every one of my guests, and you are in my tribe. So what does a warrior spirit mean to Chad Nedland?
A warrior spirit, like right before we had started, I made the comment, a warrior doesn't stand on the hill with the sword in the air. That's a victor. A warrior is in the trenches, wielding his sword. To have a warrior spirit, in my opinion, it's not to have victory over the trial. It's not to make it to the other side, to be clear of the problem, to overcome the obstacle, to beat the bad relationship, to beat the depression. A warrior spirit says, right here, right now, where I am today, in this moment, I won't quit because I know my destination. I know where I'm going to arrive, and I refuse to stop until I get to that hill and raise my sword and say, follow me.
Beautiful.
Because a warrior spirit is about activeness. It's not about a stagnant position. It's about never giving up on yourself. And once you decide what you're going to have, it just means you don't quit. And a smart warrior will follow a great leader. So if you see somebody who's already at your destination, a smart warrior doesn't stand there and beat on a tree hoping something changes. He walks around the tree like the guy ahead of him and moves on forward.
I love it. Well, Chad, it's been a super pleasure. It's been an honor to have you. I call you my brother, and I continue to do so. Much love to you and your family, and we will chat again soon.
Thank you very much. Truly honored. Appreciate you.
Have a blessed rest of your night.
All right, you too.
Bye.